Welcome to the Damn Strong podcast. I'm your host, Bree, and I'm a full-time online fitness coach, and my passion is to educate women on all things fitness. I help women just like you step into the power of knowledge and commitment to ultimately live your best and strongest life. In this podcast, we'll talk about being damn strong in our body, mind, and life. I'll be teaching you how to navigate nutrition, strength training, and mindset challenges. So get ready to take some notes because we're building a damn strong life. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Bree, and this is the Damn Strong podcast, and we're doing our monthly Q&A episode. So there's really not too much to dive in before going to this episode, but to answer these questions, if you're new here to the podcast and you're like, what's this Q&A episode? Every month I will post a link for you to ask questions that I will specifically answer on the podcast. Usually I can get through all of them. So if you're someone who's like, I want a detailed, direct answer, fill that out. Go on to whenever I post it, just keep a lookout on my stories. Go on there, put your question in there. I use the NGL app so that way you can actually type out detail. It's not as limited as using the question box from Instagram. And I've actually really been loving that because it gives me so much greater context to be answering these questions that you guys have. Okay, so let's just hop right into it for the first question. The first question is, I'm starting a fat loss phase and I've been listening to episode 7 on repeat in preparation. That's awesome. Can you provide additional advice? How to change my mindset to help me keep determined to actually lose fat? Great question. So I'd say this is kind of two parts that I want to answer this. So the first one is, can you provide additional advice? The first piece of advice I would actually say is to go through the archives of episodes, go through it. Anything that talks about fat loss, I would listen to it. And the reason why is because I think it's going to help manage your expectations. I think the biggest reason that people do not follow through with their fat loss goals is because their expectations are not set, right? So for example, I have my thing pulled up, Spotify pulled up over here on my other screen. And so if I'm just scrolling through this, episode 7 is the 4-step process to successfully starting a fat loss phase. Awesome. Great. The next one on here, what directly and indirectly affects fat loss? That would be great for you to listen to because then again, you know what you have control over, what you don't have control over. Episode 11, you might not be ready for a fat loss phase. This would be great because you're preparing for that. Maybe you listen to this episode, so you don't need to listen to it again, but it might be things to consider. Okay, wait, maybe I need to wait a couple more weeks. Maybe this is the perfect time. So I would just go ahead and scroll through here, common tracking mistakes. That's going to be, something that'll help you with being in a deficit if you're tracking, if that's what you're choosing to do. Making tracking easier and quicker on MyFitnessPal. Now there's a lot of ones here. So anyone I would say that just talks specifically about fat loss is something that I'm still scrolling, looking through. Those are ones that I would be listening to because it's going to manage your expectations. And I want to step into that. I want to talk about that just a little bit more. The reason why managing our expectations is so important is because you could be doing really, 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 really well, but because your expectations are not in a proper place, you stop and you quit when you were this close to achieving what you wanted to achieve, but you quit early. And it wasn't that you actually weren't successful. You just quit early because your perception was off, right? So a great example is something super, super recent. I think it was literally yesterday. I had a chat with a client and she's like, I'm just a little bit, we're coming up on her birthday. We talked about certain goals that we had of her approaching her birthday. It's not that she has to accomplish these goals by her birthday, but it can be really nice to kind of have some finish line in sight, right? And so her birthday's next week. So we're talking about her progress. She's like, I'm just really bummed that I've lost only 8 pounds in 4 months, which is roughly 17 weeks. So we've been working together for 17 weeks and she's lost 8 pounds. That's not bad, right? She's moving. She's achieving the goal that she wants. It is a little bit on the slower side. Sure, if you equate to 17 weeks, 8 pounds, that is a little bit on the slower side of things. But there were 2 things I'd remind her of. One, when she came to me, she was with a coach where she was following a meal plan where she had to eat exactly what was on the meal plan and she wasn't seeing any progress. She had to eat oatmeal for breakfast and she didn't even enjoy the oatmeal for breakfast. I was like, first of all, we need to remember where you came from, right? You came from a coach where you weren't seeing any fat loss and you were restricted to a specific plan. Now you're seeing fat loss, not as quickly as you're wanting. You're seeing fat loss and you're actually able to enjoy the foods that you want. She enjoys a glass of port here and there. She gets to have that. She enjoys certain meals. She gets to have those meals or pasta and all these things. She gets to enjoy those. So first we had to recognize where she was coming from, the changes. Second, I had to remind her of is out of the 17 weeks. So let me back up a little bit. With all my clients, we have a data sheet where we track their data. Okay. And this is really, really helpful for times, especially like this, right? We've been working together and in a fat loss phase for 17 weeks. But if I go back at her data sheet with all the trips that she's had, with some of the weeks that we decided not to track or weekends that we decided not to track or whatever, with all of those things, out of 17 weeks, she's actually been in a deficit for 11 weeks. So she thinks she's only lost 8 pounds in 17 weeks. But really, if we count all the weeks that she's been in a deficit where she tracked everything, we have her weigh-ins, she's hit her step goal, right? If we track all those weeks, she's actually lost 8 pounds in 11 weeks, which is roughly 0.75 of a pound per week. That is fantastic progress, right? So when you manage your expectations and you understand things a little bit more clearly of how they actually are, that can be the difference between quitting and to keep going, right? So we got to have a really good conversation of like, oh, wow, you're right. So we had to take into account all of the life things that occurred and the fact that she got to enjoy life. And even over the 4 months, she has lost 8 pounds. That's amazing because previously she wasn't. So it's recognizing where she came from. And then 2, recognizing like, okay, out of all the breaks that we've had because of all your traveling, all the stuff that you've done, maybe it's just even off weeks, you've been in deficit for 11 weeks. And so then we got to have the great discussion of like, do we want to get closer to a pound per week? We can, but we also need to discuss what those trade-offs are. And so a lot of your journey in your deficit is going to be managing those expectations, right? Because you may want to lose a pound per week. Let's say you go into your deficit, you're losing half a pound per week. You want it to go a little bit faster. You can make it go faster, but you're going to have to make some trade-offs. Maybe you have to move more. Maybe you have to lower your calories a little bit. Maybe you have to be more accurate on your tracking. And right now you're tracking just kind of so-so, but you're able to lose half a pound per week. But if you want to lose more, you have to tighten those things up. And so again, faster is, I've said this on so many other podcasts, faster is not always better because faster can sometimes lead to burnout. And so if you can manage your expectation, understand, okay, with the effort I'm putting in, what do I expect out of that, right? So I do this a lot with clients, and in a big way that I do it with is using that data sheet where, you feel like you've been doing something or you feel like you should have lost this weight or lost that weight. And you look at your data sheet and it's like, hey, we haven't hit our calorie goal, in the last 4 weeks. Like we shouldn't expect to see the fat loss because we've actually been at maintenance calories for the last 4 weeks and managing those things. So that'd be my first point of advice based off if you're just asking for any other pointers in addition to that episode is I would go through any other episodes you see with fat loss. I'd watch those or listen to those. I think I probably have some videos on them to understand and get a better expectation of things. One more thing before I move on to the second point of your question. Another thing with expectations is, clients will go out of town and when they come back, they're always heavier on the scale. And how many times, or maybe you have with yourself, or I've seen with clients where they come back from a vacation, the scale's up and they just want to be like, well, that's it. Like I will never be successful with fat loss because I just spent 4 weeks. I lost 4 pounds. I went on this vacation. I gained all 4 pounds back. They say, screw it. When actually client comes back from vacation, they're 4 pounds up. They freak out. I calm them down and I say, just trust this. Get back in routine and it'll drop. And they drop that 4 pounds that week because it was just all inflammation and water weight and food weight, right? So people can be so close because their expectations aren't managed. Their expectations with, vacation or all these things, they self-sabotage and it's actually the sabotage that undid things. They're perfectly on track the whole time, but their expectations weren't correct. And that's what screwed things up. Second part to your question was how to change my mindset to help me keep determined to actually lose fat. Man, mindsets, change my mindset. Where is it that you struggle with mindset? That's a big question. And so I think actually a better answer to you to help is actually go listen to episode 32. It's called 7 Mindsets That Are Holding You Back from Your Goals. This is when Alex was on the episode. So I'm not sure if you've gotten to the episodes where he's on. So he's on this one with me and we chit chat about that. So there may be one of those mindsets is what you struggle with. And we kind of walk through and talk through those. I would listen to that episode and that could be really, really helpful. Now I will say this before, I don't remember if this mindset's in that episode or not, but for me, the changing mindset factor for me in my fat loss, or maybe one of them, but one that comes to mind right away when you ask that, was telling myself, the more I put it off or the more I don't stick to it, the longer that goal is going to take. Right. And so for me, it was, my rock bottom point where I finally actually, had the dedication and really dropped the body fat that I wanted was, I told myself for years and years and years, I'll make this story short. I told myself for years and years and years I was going to do it. And then I remember it looking back and being like, I've been telling myself I'm going to do this for 4 years and I still haven't done it. Like all that time has passed. Imagine if I'd stuck to it, where I would have been in 4 years. Imagine 4 years of progress. Like the time is moving no matter what. And so, and I really dialed in things in, and I thought about, oh, I don't want to go for a walk, or I don't want to go work out, or I don't, want to stick to my calories or whatever. I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to, but just acknowledge you're okay with your goals taking longer than you want. I was like, no way. I don't want this to take longer. And it's like, okay, well then let's stick to the goals that you have. Of course, I engage this in my mindset in a healthy way, right? I need to manage the expectations. If sticking to a certain goal that day wasn't realistic, then I need to be real with myself. But there are definitely a lot of times, I'm sure, in your journey and in everyone's journey where you just purely don't want to do something because you don't feel like doing it. And so in those moments where I was just doing something out of purely not feeling like it, like I just didn't want to go to walk, I wanted to watch TV. It's like, that's okay. You can watch TV, but just you have to acknowledge right now that you're okay with your goals taking longer if by not going for this walk right now and getting those steps in. And it's like, okay, you know what? I'll watch Netflix on my phone and I'll get walks in at the same time. So that was one that really helped me. Just acknowledging the reality, acknowledging the natural outcome of the decision I'm going to make and making sure I'm okay with that outcome. If I am, awesome. Sit your butt on the couch and continue to watch TV. If you're not, then why are you continuing to sit on the couch and watch TV? Let's go change that because you have control to go for a walk. Okay, next question is, when doing heavy compounds, does it make more sense to start your working sets at your heaviest weight, then lower the weight as you get tired, or work up to the last set as your heaviest weight? For the sake of the question, if these are my only two options here, I would pick work up to the last set as your heaviest weight. The reason being is because you're more likely going to be close to failure if you're upping your intensity throughout your sets than lowering your intensity, right? Now, and that's assuming you're keeping the same reps, right? If you're like, hey, I'm doing 8 reps for all of my sets, then you are, as you get tired, if you're lowering the weight over time, and doing the same reps, you're decreasing the intensity and moving yourself away from failure. If you're keeping the same reps on each set and you're increasing the weight, then you're increasing the intensity and you're working close to failure. So I would work up to your heaviest weight. Now, if that's what I'm saying for my only two options. For my own clients and for my group training, we work with RIR. So you don't have to be adjusting weight so much. If you enjoy doing that, go for it. That's totally fine for you to do that. There's so many different ways for you to adjust intensity. But we, keep the weight the same and work with an RIR, which is like an intensity scheme where you can work with like RPE. And so to adjust your intensity. And so you're not having to constantly do the math and be like, okay, well, I did 8 reps on this one and this much weight. So I'm going to do 9, then I need to lower the weight. And it just becomes complicated math. So if you're unfamiliar with like RIR, RPE, go listen to episode 5, I believe is when it's called like, You're Not Lifting Heavy Enough. That's a good one to go listen to make sure that you're working at a proper intensity. There also is an RIR episode. It's episode 39. So if you're like, wait, what is this RIR, RPE stuff that she's talking about? Go listen to that episode as well. It may help to simplify your training. I'm not trying to say you can't train this way. If you want to increase your weight, on your sets, that's totally fine. Personally, that's extra work in my workout and I don't want to do that. And so it's nice to keep the same weight and work more so with reps. And then RIR to make sure that I'm working hard enough to build muscle. Okay. Next question is, why do weight loss plateaus happen? I swear I'm doing the exact same moving and tracking and have not lost a pound in 2 weeks. I was losing 1.5 pounds per week before. I'm eating the exact food, tracking to the gram, same steps, activity. I understand if it slows down due to untrackable changes, but has not moved. So let me answer your first question. Why does weight loss plateaus happen? Okay. So the first reason is you've lost enough weight that your maintenance and your calorie deficit calories have changed for you to see that significant loss that you're wanting, to see that ROI that you're wanting. Okay. So let's say you lose 50 pounds, your deficit, as you lose body fat and you lose weight, your body doesn't require as much energy as it used to. So maybe you maintained on 2,400 calories, and because you've lost 50 pounds, now your maintenance is 2,200 calories. And so your 500 calorie deficit has now turned into a 300 calorie deficit. And so weight loss is slowing down. And it is possible for it to slow down enough to where it looks like you're at maintenance / it's going really, really slow. And that's quote unquote a weight loss plateau. So the majority of the reason it happens, a weight loss plateau, physiologically is because you have lost weight and now your deficit is no longer as big of a deficit as it used to be. Okay. I don't believe that's what's happened to you, but you asked the question of why do they happen? That is why they happen. Another reason that they can happen is, and again, I don't think this portrays to you, is if you're in a deficit for a long enough time, your tracking can get sloppy. You don't hit your steps as much as you're wanting. And so the plateau can simply be because you're not being as accurate as stuff. This is actually a big reason for a lot of my clients that I find that, hey, let's go back to maintenance. I see that they're dropping the ball on tracking here and there. They don't want to track. They're not hitting their step goal as often. Maybe the gym's just not important. They're just kind of getting burnt out and being in fat loss. And so things are just getting a little loosey-goosey. And when that happens, we start to see the fat loss really either slow down or it just plateaus out because they're half tracking things or not fully tracking things. And even though they've tracked 1,800 calories because they were loosey-goosey about it, they actually had 2,100 calories, right? So that can be another reason for a plateau, is that you just simply need to tighten things up. But the main reason, if like how you described it, let me reread it. You said, and I love that you specified this because this would be my question. You said you swear that you're doing the exact same thing. You've analyzed that. You're like, I've not changed my tracking. I've not changed my movement. I'm doing everything perfectly. You're like, I'm eating the exact food. I track to the gram, same steps, same activity. I haven't changed anything, but in 2 weeks, I've not lost a single pound. So more than likely what's happening in those 2 weeks is one of those weeks a period week. Okay. It's totally possible that in one of those weeks, it was a period week. And so therefore you plateaued out and you just haven't really let go of that, that water weight over that week. Right. It could just be because I don't know how long you've been in deficit. I don't think you say, nope, you haven't say. It could be that you had really shitty sleep one week. You were really, really stressed out these past couple of weeks. And so your body's held on to a bunch of water and it's just retaining that. And it's just a matter of patience. I'm actually going to answer this and just say if you were previously losing 1.5 pounds per week on average consistently in the weeks, and all of a sudden out of nowhere for 2 weeks, you're not losing anything, it's not because you've plateaued. When you plateau, it doesn't simply go from like losing 1.5 pounds to nothing. It would go from 1.5 to a pound per week. And then a pound per week. I'm not saying that's exact math, but like 1.5 to 1.25, and then 1 pound, and then 0.75. You'd see it slow down before it plateaus if physiologically that's why you're plateauing, right? If as you're losing weight, your deficit's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If it's psychological, a lot of times you can, where you're just getting tired of being in a deficit and your tracking goes to the wayside, that's where you can see the more abrupt stop because it just depends on how loosey-goosey you've gotten. But you're saying you haven't gotten loosey-goosey. I would not stop. I really think it's a water retention thing for some reason. Like I said, you're eating the same. So it's probably either stress, sleep, period is coming up, period just happened. I'm not sure if you get a period. All this to say, don't change anything. Keep what you're doing. I guarantee you, I bet, probably by next week, you'll start to see some movement again. Just hold through that. This is, again, back to the first thing we answered. This is where people self-sabotage, is they don't see something for 2 weeks and then they throw their hands up. I always tell my clients, we don't make any changes to your protocols until you've been consistent for 2 weeks back to back. If after 2 weeks back to back, you've been 100% consistent, hitting your steps, hitting your all your protocol targets, and we don't see any movement, then we will consider changing something. And when I say consider, because a lot of times we have 2 full weeks where we haven't seen any movement, but the start of that third week, we already see the number going downward, and it's like, okay, it's coming. It's coming. Like, you were weighing in at 176 for the last 2 weeks and all of a sudden, boom, you had a 175 day. It's like, okay, you were pretty stagnant for the last 2 weeks, right around that 176. And all of a sudden, boom, you had your first 175. Something's moving. Let's wait a third week. So I don't always change protocol just because something hasn't happened in 2 weeks. We consider changing something after 2 weeks based off that 2 weeks. So my advice to you is to hold true and see that third week through, and also consider if you've been on your period, because it could be that you had a weird week where you're just stagnant. It always happens. I don't think I've ever had a client where they've consistently dropped a pound every single week. There's always some weird off week, whether it's a period week or a stress week where they just don't lose anything. It's just very stagnant. So it could be at a stress week and all of a sudden your period came up and now you'll be dropping it from after your period. So there's just those things to consider. I think it would be also super, super helpful for you to go listen to episode 57, which is literally an entire episode on weight loss plateaus. It's literally just called weight loss plateaus. That could be really helpful for you to listen to. I'm sure there's other things that I dig into. Probably what to do. I think I may dive into what you need to do if you, yes, I do. I say it in the description. It says, after listening to this episode, you'll gain a much better understanding and know exactly what to do if you hit a plateau, if you truly do. So go listen to episode 57 as well. Okay, next question is tips for consistency, motivation, and discipline when mental health is messed up. This is a very big question because I don't know what you mean by mental health is messed up, right? Is it you're struggling with anxiety? Are you struggling with depression? Do you struggle, with an eating disorder? Like where in your mental health, is that? And so part of me, when I initially read this question, my first thought is like, go talk to a therapist, like get the mental health stuff in check before worrying about fat loss. Like there's no body worth being in if you are really struggling mentally, right? You can lose 30 pounds, but if you still hate yourself, if you hate yourself now, you're going to hate yourself 30 pounds later is something I always say. Like that's how important the mental part to it. First thing I'm going to advise, seek a therapist if that's something you want to go down. I think that'd be incredibly helpful and then can worry about things from there. But if I'm to answer this outside the therapy route, if just tips for consistency, motivation, and discipline, just when you're struggling in general, I think the biggest one is it kind of goes back to the first one, manage your expectations and reeling back on things and starting small and baby steps, I think is a really big one for when you're really, really struggling mentally in maybe whatever capacity. I have, with certain clients, there's like, I do baby steps. With other clients, we have these like, bare minimums that we go with. And, baby steps is something like, okay, all I want you to do is just prioritize your health and you're going to go for a walk every single day. That's it. Let's just start there. And it doesn't be a long walk. We're not even commit to a time period, right? We aren't commit to say you have to get 30 minutes every day. You just have to go on a walk. I don't care if it's 2 minutes. I don't care if it's 5 minutes. I don't care if it's an hour. You just have to find the time to say, hey, I'm prioritizing my health. My health is important to me and I'm going to show up for myself, even if it's something. I'm going to always choose something over nothing always. And so, starting with those baby steps. Another strategy I use with my clients is like bare minimums. It's like, okay, let's make a bare minimum for ourselves. On your worst week, how do you still want to show up for yourself, for your health, right? What's really, really important to you? It's like, okay, well, maybe movement is, right? Maybe, hitting enough protein, something that doesn't feel super overwhelming to you, but this is the biggest thing I think is really, really important is when you don't take care of yourself physically, it doesn't help the mental part. You just feel more like shit, which is kind of a double-edged sword because, you don't feel great mentally. So you don't want to take care of yourself physically, but you don't take care of yourself physically. And so you end up feeling worse mentally. And it's just this hamster wheel that you're on that you're having a hard time getting off. It's really like a merry-go-round. And you're like, if I step off, I'm going to get flung. You know what I mean? And so you just keep this cycle going. And so what I like to have for my clients, if you have a week that you're struggling, where you're just like, it's busy or something, happens or whatever it may be, it's like, what are our bare minimums? What do we find important? Our health is always a priority to us. It's always going to be, especially when we're struggling, but we need to find bare minimums of, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm not going to put a time constraint on it. I'm also going to have a protein for breakfast and lunch, and then dinners, I'm not going to worry about protein. And finding bare minimum ways to show up for yourself, I think can be really, really helpful. As I keep reading this question, I'm looking through the 3 words. You say consistency, motivation, and discipline. I think it's important to understand these words, right? Especially like consistency. I think a lot of people think that consistency is I have to do all 6 of my protocols every single day or I'm not consistent. It's like, no, going back to what I said a little bit earlier, if your bare minimum is like, hey, I'm going to go for a walk every day and not put a time constraint on it, you're building consistency that way. For a lot of us, I feel like it's like, hey, I'm going to go for an hour walk every day. And the first day we miss that hour walk, we're like, I'm a failure. I can't be consistent. This is just the worst. You haven't met yourself where you're at, right? Like, let's just say, let's instead build a consistency that makes sense, a consistency that you can actually be consistent with and just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk no matter what, even if it's only 2 minutes, because that's something that I can actually show up and do. And then as you get good with that, then you increase what you're doing. Okay, you know what? Now I'm going to make the bare minimum has to be 5 minutes. No matter what, I have to get a 5-minute walk. And then from there you go to 10, and then maybe you work yourself to 30 and you realize, you know what? I'm not super consistent at 30, but I still go for a walk every day. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 30, but I average out in the week to 30 minutes a day on average, right? Motivation. Motivation is doing something based on how you feel. That word, throw it out, because you're never, ever, and I'm sorry for those who have listened to so many episodes where I've talked about this, but you're never, ever, ever, ever going to hit any goal in life purely based off motivation. Motivation is a bonus. How you feel wanting to do stuff that will get you towards your goals is just an added bonus. Stop seeing it as the basis when it's the bonus. Ooh, that's a cute little saying. Motivation is a bonus, not a basis. Okay. That's not where any of your goals are going to start on is motivation. Okay. It starts actually at discipline, the last word that you put on there. Discipline, where it starts, because discipline is doing something is doing something despite how you feel, right? So discipline to go to the gym. You go to the gym even though you don't feel like it, right? Because you're building consistency. Okay. And then you go to the gym and it feels great. And then you get done at the gym and oh my gosh, you feel motivated to go for a walk after the gym. That motivation is a bonus. The fact that you're going for a walk and you feel like going for a walk, that feeling of wanting to go for your walk after your gym workout is just a bonus. It works out. I don't always feel, there's so many things. Again, I've talked about motivation, discipline a lot, so I don't want to talk too ad nauseum because I know a lot of you know this, but you do not go through your day on motivation alone. I'm sure this morning when you woke up for work, you did not feel like waking up for work, but you did it anyways. Didn't feel like waking up for work is motivation. Doing it anyways is discipline. You may not feel like picking up your kids from school. Part of that is you don't want, Child Protective Services coming to get you because you leave your kid at school all the time, but you don't feel like it. Motivation, but you go and do it anyways because you love your kids and you're a good parent. And so you do it. That's discipline. That the world goes round and round and round on discipline. Motivation is literally just a bonus, not a basis. I'm proud of myself for that little saying. I'm going to leave that there and want you to remember that when you are going to go do something, you say, I don't feel like, right there, you can stop yourself and be like, I'm making this decision based on my emotions. I'm not saying your emotions aren't valid. There are definitely times where maybe you had a death in the family, something super tragic. Of course, it's okay to not feel like going to the gym, right? Like you just had a death in the family, but there's times where you're like, I don't feel like going because I just don't feel like going. Like I want to watch Netflix. I want to do whatever. And that's when it's like, okay, am I going to go and do stuff because I feel like things? Am I going to base off emotions? Or am I going to have the discipline, which creates consistency, which gives you the bonus of motivation? That's really how the world spins. It goes discipline, turns into consistency, turns into motivation. So you listed those literally backwards? Yeah, because I guess you didn't list them backwards. They were just in a different order. Doesn't really matter. But the order really is discipline to consistency to motivation, right? And before even the discipline comes action, right? Action builds the discipline, builds the consistency, which then gives you the bonus of motivation. I'm actually going to end the podcast right there. We didn't have that many submissions for a Q&A this month, so we're going to end it there. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you got some good nuggets from this episode that's going to help you in your journey. As always, if you have any comments to leave, any feedback, please shoot me a DM and let me know that feedback and all that. Or if you're on Spotify, you can leave a little comment on this episode and I can get it that way. So I will see you guys next week and have a great rest of your week. Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Damn Strong Podcast. Show me some love by leaving a review and sharing a screenshot of this episode on your Instagram stories. Until next time, stay strong.